Greetings, everybody. This is another episode of All Things Education Official. I'm your host, Mr. Abdullah. Why Black American teachers should be the primary educators for Black American children. Roll that clip.
One of the teachers shot.
More than 3 months after first grade teacher Abigail Zwerner was shot by her 6-year-old student in class, the mother of that young boy has now been criminally charged. A Newport News grand jury indicting 25-year-old Deja Taylor on one count of felony child neglect and one misdemeanor count of recklessly leaving a loaded firearm so as to endanger a child.
Who would be prepared for a 6-year-old to bring a loaded weapon onto school?
After authorities announced the 6-year-old would not be charged with a crime, the Commonwealth's attorney said every criminal case is unique in its facts, and these facts support these charges, but our investigation into the shooting continues. Abigail Zwerner speaking exclusively to Savannah last month.
The initial gunshot went through my left hand. The gunshot then went into my chest up here.
The 25-year-old, who says the bullet still remains lodged in her body, is suing school administrators for $40 million, alleging gross negligence. Zwerner said staff failed to act on several warnings that the 6-year-old had a gun.
Everything about this is so unthinkable. I wonder what you think or how you feel about this student.
I just will never forget the look on his face that he gave me while he pointed the gun directly at me. That's something that I will never forget.
The boy's family also said he suffers from an acute disability and that he was under a care plan at the school that includes his parents accompanying him to class every day. But according to a statement from the family, the week of the shooting was the first week when they were not in class with him. Zwerner's civil suit also alleging that the parents did not agree for him to be placed into special education classrooms.
All right. Well, as you can see, we knew just by the mere fact that they charged the parent for the crime of the child, we all knew that that was a Black child. I'm just being honest. I'm going to say some things in this video that are probably a little uncomfortable, and that's okay, because if you don't have uncomfortable conversations, you won't come to resolution. Let's just be clear. This young lady who's being charged by the actions of her 6-year-old is being unjustly charged. We understand that children, no matter what the age, make decisions for themselves. We do understand that we are in charge of children to give them the proper decisions, but there are some things that are not discussed in depth that need to be discussed. In all of my years in education, in 3 different districts on the Eastern Seaboard, I have worked with IEP students. Those are special education, special needs students, and IEP stands for Individual Educational Plan. I have worked on identification meetings where we identify children who need special needs services. I've helped to develop individual education plans, and I've also helped to implement them. I have never, in all of my years in education, seen a plan that required parents to be in school with the child every day. Never. I've seen them be referred out to special services, different educational settings, have a paraprofessional or a teacher's aide. That's a one-to-one, but I have never heard of that. But I have heard of Black parents being given specific criteria that is not even legal. Now, I'm not going to say I'm the guru and know everything about special education. I am not, but I can tell you this. If you know of a situation such as this that has been done, and you are an educator and you have helped to implement a plan like this, please do me a favor, reach out to me at info@allthingseducator.com so you can enlighten me, because I need to know. It's info@allthingseducator.com. I've never seen it, but when I saw that they required a parent to be with the child every day while they were in school, that's just an amazing hardship on parents. I know that if this were a Caucasian child, if this were an Asian child, that would not be the case. I just have to say it. I must lay it on the line. It would not be the case. It's just a fact. Also, they specified and made mention of the fact that this was the one day the parent wasn't there. And I'm going to be honest. I watched the interview, and I watched it a couple times with the young lady, and her statement was, "I'll never forget the look in his eyes." You trying to tell me this 6-year-old struck so much fear in you through his look, his gaze. In my personal opinion, this may ruffle little feathers, I think that she's just over vilifying this kid. Yes, the child brought a gun and shot her. Who would say that's not enough to vilify a child? I understand the sentiment. I genuinely do. But we are talking about a 6-year-old that the prosecutors won't even charge because they know it would be ridiculous. They know this. So they're going to charge the parent for negligence. I'm trying to understand how. And they're giving a lot of hocus pocus abracadabra talk. They're saying, well, if the gun was secured, how did the child get a hold of it? If you've never had a child, please don't join this conversation. But because I will tell you this, my youngest is 10, and my 10-year-old son can do anything when it comes to anything that has a mechanism or has electronics connected to it. So we're not going to have that conversation about how the child got it out, because for all intents and purposes, let's just say the child did get that gun out. It wasn't locked up safely. Okay, then that's a valuable argument. But the parents are claiming that the gun was locked up appropriately. And I'm going to go with the parents on this. I'm going to go with them on this. I'm sorry. I just refuse to believe that this gun was unlocked. I'm just not going to do it. I have to wait to see all the evidence. I got to see it all. I'm sorry. I need to see the evidence. But for them to have those parents come in every single day to sit with this child, instead of placing them, having an out-of-district placement, out of a different school placement, no. That is a luxury that is afforded to those that are other than Black, specifically Black Americans. And I'm sorry, that's my feeling, that's my commentary on it. I truly believe that. Moving forward, I like to say that the mere fact that they have a white woman interviewing these 2 white women, I think one's the lawyer representing, because she's suing for $40 million because the district was negligent. If the district did know or did not take heed to the warnings that this child had a gun, they are negligent and they need to come out of that money and they need to be held accountable. But I think to vilify a 6-year-old as if a 6-year-old has full rational capabilities, that's ridiculous. How many times have we seen adults, school shooters, be given all types of excuses? I mean, we don't have to name them all because we'll be here all night discussing how mass shooters have been given rise to Burger King, being fed, told, they were mentally ill, they had an issue, they were bullied. But with a 6-year-old, no, I just won't forget the look on his face. I'm sorry. I just can't get with it. And I think that, I'm going to be very honest, had that child been in an appropriate setting, and when I say the appropriate setting, I don't mean just a academic setting with a personalized individual education plan, an IEP. I'm talking about with the proper teachers, with the proper staffing, because I know Black children. I was a Black child. I've raised Black children. I work with Black children for over 20 years. And what I can tell you is that Black children love their teachers, especially the ones that they know love them back. In order for that child to do that, we can rule in some serious mental health issues, or why not consider that that child felt fully unloved, ostracized by that teacher? Is that something we can't consider? I genuinely believe we need to consider that. That is a distinct possibility, because I cannot imagine a child taking upon themselves to bring a gun to a school just because they were angry at a teacher. I just don't believe that. Not to mention, what are the conditions in that classroom that led to that child feeling the need to do that? Even though the child is only 6, that is an act of desperation. Children can't rationalize things. So I think that's an act of desperation. I want to hear more about this case. I'm definitely going to follow it because I need to know how this turns out, what shakes from the tree when they hit it hard enough, because I really want to know. But I like to also go into the fact that Brother Philip Scott made a very, very great point in one of his monologues. Let's listen to that right now. Roll that clip.
Listen, our first interaction with racism is always in the schoolhouse. Elementary school, the first racism, the little educarons. That's the first racism we ever deal with. We don't really deal with the police like that. I'm talking about growing up, your first interaction with racism and discrimination is going to be in public school. That's when you're going to see them making a difference between your white classmate and you. You're going to see when you do wrong, you get in more trouble, but Connor, he don't get no trouble. That's when you start really seeing the differences. This is why it's important. I always say that about our children, is that if we can keep our children out of public school, that they teach your children and they control, then do it. Pay whatever you got to pay to put them in a school that's ran by black people, controlled by black people. It is for the betterment of your child.
I think that that's all that needs to be said. I mean, I think that Philip Scott is so very, very on point with this. He made the point that we need to start our own schools. We need to have our own educational systems, because our first interaction with racism typically is an educational system. I can attest to that personally. I was put into parochial schools by my family, and I was called nigger, monkey, and these were by nuns, priests, and brothers in a Catholic church. As a matter of fact, I got a quick story. There was one young lady, she lived in our neighborhood, a white girl, only one in our neighborhood. She lived up the block from me, and she attended the same school. And there was a little talent show contest they had. And do you know that when she decided to join the little dance group with the girls, the brother Tom, he pulled her aside and said to her, "Why are you dancing like a little nigger?" And being that she was from our neighborhood, she knew us, she looked at us like friends and family, she was heartbroken and she was crying. And me, I was a social worker from day one. I went to her, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And she said, "He called me a nigger." And, I had to I was taken aback. So, because I knew that that's what they called us, but they never called the white people that. We had a couple there, Steve, Frank, her, and I remember that. And I went to him and I said, "Why did you call her a nigger?" And he condescendingly stated to me, "Well, you do know what nigger means, right? It means stupid and ignorant." Had I been a little bit more knowledgeable, much more intelligent, much more learned, I would have said, so her dancing like foundational Black Americans is ignorant? But at that point, I was just so upset. And because my family at the time, a large number of them were devout Catholics, when I went to them and they had went to parochial schools, to Catholic schools, they just wouldn't believe that a brother or a nun or a priest would have said such a thing. And that was one of my first introductions to racism in America, and it was within the educational system. Not to mention, let's take curriculum. How often do you see Black people and their real accomplishments taught in the system of education in America? We're talking about Catholic, Lutheran, public. You just don't see it. And you know why you don't? Because there is an anti-Black sentiment that permeates the fabric of this nation, and it starts in the educational system. It's no secret. So why are we acting like it is? I work with children to this day, and when we have conversations about historical events that include us, Black Americans, as a group, these children have no clue about any of it because it was never taught. And I'm talking about middle schoolers. So they had between kindergarten to 5th grade to have these conversations, up to 6th grade to have these conversations, and they're not having them. That's why we need our own schools. We need schools that will help us to understand how great of a people Black Americans were. And if you don't even have to have a specific curriculum, if you just taught true history, taught the truth, you'd have no choice but to include foundational Black Americans in that conversation. I think that if we as a community, as a collective community of Black parents, want our children to be successful academically, we got to give them a firm foundation. That's why I say they need Black American teachers. And the reason why I'm very specific about that is because I have worked alongside immigrant Black administrators and teachers. And I need to be very honest with you, it's going to hurt some feelings, but immigrant Blacks don't look at foundational Black Americans like they look at themselves. They look at us as inferior. A lot of times because of what they were told, how they were vetted prior to them even coming to the country, because of the stereotypes, because of the media, because the only things they see of us are on television, and most of it is cast in a negative light. Now, of course, there are some of the immigrant Black population, maybe second generations, third generations, who have lived amongst us and know our greatness and treat us as their own. But typically, you're talking first generation, maybe second generation immigrants, Black, that come here. They treat us with the same level of disdain as Caucasians, as Europeans, as the dominant society. And I just think that we need to be very, very mindful of these things when we hire people to work in our public educational system until we are able to collectively create school systems. Now, my son attends a charter school which has an Afrocentric theme, and the theme is more about Black empowerment, and that's why he's still in that school. My daughter attended the school as such, but it's just important that we do put Black people that understand our culture in front of our children. That's so very, very important. If you don't, you are doing your children a disservice. Just remember, every single time you put a person in front of your child, they have their mind, and they can very well change the course of their life, the trajectory of their life, by one or two things they said. You will be amazed at how I have said so many things to students, but the one thing I said in passing is the one thing they latched on to, and they utilized it to control or propel them forward. It's amazing. So you have to remember that one teacher can say something that can either help or hinder your child. Once again, it's another episode of All Things Education Official. You are now officially dismissed.
Yeah! You are all expurgated. You are dismissed.